Further debate. Member for Waterloo.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's an interesting day to be debating Bill 236 today. There's so much going on right now in the province with regards to precarious workers, gig workers, and those who do not have the security under the Labour Relations Act. Bill 236, just in case you're tuning in, because it's Tuesday and this was only introduced on Thursday, this bill caps fees that third-party delivery apps can charge to restaurants at 15% with a maximum 20% for all fees charged. This only applies to restaurants that are closed to indoor dining and does not apply to chain restaurants. And a chain restaurant in this instance is considered if you have 10 or more restaurants. Obviously, this is a step in the right direction. I wrote to the minister back in June, as did many colleagues from the official opposition. It is now 6 months later, and the government has come forward with a bill which in the spirit addresses the issue, but leaves major gaps from an efficacy perspective. This is a step in the right direction, and we, of course, are going to be supporting it because we called for it, but there are a few concrete ways that this bill could have been improved. I personally would have liked to have had a chance to try to improve it, Mr. Speaker. This is obviously a pattern that we have seen from the government, and this is actually in keeping with the entire theme of this government, whereby they pretend or state that they understand a problem, but then they come to the table with only a half measure. So I want to put it on record what we would do if we were tackling this problem. If it should be a province-wide issue. It should be a province-wide piece of legislation which would assist with every business, every small business in Ontario. It should cover restaurants across the province, not just those who are currently closed to indoor dining. And the fact that the legislation has been crafted in this manner indicates that the government has very selective hearing when they are actually listening to issues that pertain to the economy. This becomes even more important when you consider the mixed messaging that has come out from this government as it relates to lockdowns, safety measures, and the assistance that has been much cried about across this province. Indoor dining in some areas can remain open, but the Premier is telling people to stay home, for instance. The government has said, we care deeply about small businesses, and yet they're allowing big box operators to both sell essential and non-essential items, which disproportionately negatively affects small businesses, particularly on Main Street. And I made this point yesterday during question period when I basically said to the government, if you're going into a Walmart and you can buy shoes and flowers and books, then you're not going to go down to the Main Street business and order online or go curbside and pick up those items. I mean, this is a fundamental issue of fairness. Manitoba has taken such measures, Mr. Speaker. And the fact that the Premier is taking his marching orders from the president of Walmart and actually indicated in a press conference that, the CEO of Walmart says he's got to do it this way. It is something that I've actually never thought I would hear from a Premier who's elected to serve the people. And I think, there are some complex issues in the world. I think figuring out how to not allow someone to buy a pair of jeans, for instance, while they're going in to buy their milk is something that we can tackle as a province. The bar is very low in this regard. It seems like a no-brainer to give restaurants across the province the chance to keep a bit more of their revenue, at the very least. That is something that should have happened. This legislation should have very clear protections for gig workers. Right now, the bill has a just trust us vibe, which is worrying, as this government hasn't exactly earned the trust of Ontarians, especially precarious workers. The onus is on gig workers to file complaints if income is affected by the cap. And I want to just cite one of the press releases that came out from one of the organizations, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. This just came out yesterday. They've just had a chance to analyze the bill, and they represent some gig workers who deliver for these apps. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers and app-based delivery workers have grave concerns about the Ontario's Supporting Local Restaurants Act, which aims to limit fees charged by third-party food delivery operations like Uber Eats and DoorDash. And while the Act may help small businesses, it provides little protection to couriers making the deliveries, whose wages may be threatened as companies look for ways to make up the lost revenue from capped fees. And this is in quotations. The couriers we work with are already shortchanged by their app-based employers, says Jan Simpson, the national president. We're worried that employers will pass the cost on to the workers who have little to no transparency about their pay rates as it is. So, I've said this many times in this House. In order to address a problem, you actually have to understand that the problem exists. There is a huge power imbalance right now in Ontario between couriers who work for these app-based employers. The bill, it goes on, is intended to ease the burden on small businesses where indoor dining is impossible due to pandemic restrictions. And it was introduced just last Thursday. Delivery apps charge restaurants already hurting for business up to 30% for the delivery services. So that is the problem. Unfortunately, this bill does not address the problem in its entirety. The Premier has asked the apps in the past to reduce their fees, and not having seen results is moving ahead with legislation. This is also a theme that we have seen from this Premier. He came out very hard around price gouging, a Bruno's or a Longo's, and shook his fist and said that's not fair. It hasn't worked with the insurance companies, who continually raise their rates, sometimes 3 times as much, or deny insurance to small businesses across this province. It certainly hasn't helped when he begged the for-profit long-term care operators to not to pay their PSWs a fair wage and not have them go from home to home. So this pattern of the Premier, raising his fist and saying this is not right and I'm going to hit the ceiling, and saying certain people are, a few French fries short of a Happy Meal has not been a method that has worked. And yet, it is still the method that is embedded in this legislation, because there is no mechanism to hold the app-based fee companies to account. The legislation in writing prohibits delivery companies from passing the financial impact of the cap onto their workers, but little is said about how the province plans to enforce this. So you have knowingly crafted a piece of legislation, understanding and articulating the problem, as the Premier has done, and left it open for abuse. So that is something that we were constantly trying to work with other members in this legislature, because this is a problem that we can actually solve together, Mr. Speaker. The press release goes on to say, the bill provides a complaints-based mechanism to the Ministry of Small Business and red tape reductions for workers who think their employer is cutting into their compensation. Well, that sounds like a little bit more like red tape, doesn't it, Mr. Speaker? But it doesn't offer real labour protections. A complaints process is of little use to couriers who are already intimidated or reason to fear losing their income through cut hours or simply being deleted from the app. That is how the gig economy works. If a courier is problematic, if they identify an inconsistency in labour practices, the company just goes to their mainframe and deletes them. That's how these things work in the province of Ontario. For some reason, this is okay by this government, Mr. Speaker. A complaints process that should be embedded and very clearly articulated, so that if workers feel that the app-based delivery company is really trying to make up for their losses because of a cap that has been imposed on the government, has very little recourse. And that is most unfortunate, because this is already a very disenfranchised group of employees in Ontario. Instead of addressing the underlying imbalance of gig workers being misclassified as independent contractors, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, the onus of asserting what should be basic labour rights is once again put on couriers' shoulders. So in a time of crisis, a health crisis, an economic crisis, this government has signalled that this group of employees, this group of workers who have very little rights, very little license, as workers in Ontario are now further going to be marginalized, Mr. Speaker. It's been clear with recent examples that the apps are free to change their pay structure unilaterally without transparency. Workers often have no idea how their pay is calculated, and rates can vary wildly from hour to hour, says Bryce Sofer, who is a courier in Toronto. Expecting gig workers to conclusively prove that they've had their pay cut through some nebulous complaints process essentially allows companies like DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, and Uber Eats to slash pay for couriers with very little risk or any repercussions. The app's business model has always exploited both small businesses and couriers, says Simpson. This bill is not enough to make them change their ways. How are workers to know, let alone prove to the government, that they're paying for the fee cap to protect large profits, large corporations? The burden falls on the wrong people, and he goes on to say that they demand protection for workers. So once again, this government has missed the mark with this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. And before I go on, I want to get the voice of a gig worker who has already written to the Minister of Small Business and Red Tape, and her name is Jennifer Scott. Because for some reason, this government continually is making these same gestures, same moves, same courses of action that continually leave these workers off to the side, even though the Premier himself has articulated the problem. So it goes on to say, good evening, I'm a gig worker. I deliver food for Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Skip the Dishes. I've been working in this industry for 4 years. Due to worker misclassification, I'm currently taxed as a small business. Well, that adds insult to injury. I deserve to be consulted on legislation that impacts my business's ability to access work and to earn enough to continue working. I'm deeply concerned that the Supporting Local Restaurants Act will worsen the precarious position of delivery workers. Your assurance that we will be able to seek recourse in the form of filing a complaint in the event that the app employers shift the burden of the cost of a cap on fees to our shoulders is dangerous. In regards to filing a complaint, she writes, how can we demonstrate that our wages have changed when the calculations for our wages aren't made transparent to us? What options are available to us in this situation where we don't have access to the necessary documentation to demonstrate pay changes to your office? I would like to know how you will ensure that we receive labour-driven protections despite the fact that we are currently denied access to any recourse or rights. In this industry, restaurant operators and gig workers are on the same side. We're both facing pandemic profiteering from the tech giants that provide access to the necessary work that has helped to secure jobs and businesses through COVID-19. Legislation to support one type of small business experience financial gouging at the cost of another type of small business is not representative of us all being in this together. And that "in this together" is in quotes. With all due respect, Jennifer Scott. She goes on to say, I'd like to add to it, in light of the speed with which this is being processed and the serious implications for precarious workers, I firmly assert that the only way to build a complaint system that will ensure accountability and support gig workers is to do that with consultation with them. So once again, the government has not consulted the very people who are facing the injustice, Mr. Speaker. The onus should not be on the workers who are already in an extremely precarious position and do not have basic labour rights. This is not okay. The Ford government has clear contempt for improving working conditions for people across the province. As one example, we continue to wait for comprehensive paid sick days after the government slashed them. And this to be now on, this is December 1st, is it December 1st? And December 1st, when this whole thing started, there may have been, a disconnect between the health and well-being of workers and the economy and the state of our public health in the province of Ontario. There should no longer be a disconnect. The fact that this government has not acted on paid sick days and those who work in the service sector continually have to go to work when they are not feeling well, there is a direct connection to the transmission and spread of COVID-19. When you have no choice but to go to work sick, you are going to go to work sick. And because this government has failed so utterly on the paid sick day leave, this continues to spiral this province into further cases, Mr. Speaker, and ultimately will have a negative impact on the economy. Small businesses told us this. During the historic 4-month consultation that this government embraced and yet did not act on, Mr. Speaker. Early on in their mandate, we saw them dismantle protections for workers under the Employment Standards Act. These moves and this bill have the potential to have a hugely negative impact on gig workers, the people who keep the system going. App delivery workers need this government to guarantee their income and their rights. And you had the opportunity to do that in Bill 236. You would have had our full support had you done so. They already earn, these are gig workers, meagre pay without basic labour rights and are misclassified as independent contractors and should not see their income cut as a result of the change. Now, we know that gig delivery workers on apps like Uber Eats and DoorDash are misclassified as independent contractors. This is a well-documented case, which means they are daily denied basic workers' rights and protections. Basic worker rights and protections. This misclassification happens under the Employment Standards Act, ensuring that these gig workers have no rights as employees, essentially. It is essentially the Wild West out there when you're considering gig workers. Companies like Uber and DoorDash just spent $200 million in California to essentially write their own labour law to deny gig workers their rights and to continue to misclassify them. And one has to wonder, Mr. Speaker, given who has the ear of the Premier in the province of Ontario, did they have an influence on how this legislation was crafted? Because it certainly isn't in the interest of gig workers, of the very people who do the work. Delivery workers fear the downloading of the fee cap onto their already meagre and inadequate earnings, and and have no labour rights. There would be no recourse for them, and this has been well documented. Any legislation on capping delivery fees to save our local restaurants needs to also save the delivery workers, making sure the food gets to the customer. I mean, if you consider how important the delivery service sector has become to our economy, given the fact that people are no longer altogether comfortable going into restaurants. In a town like Kitchener-Waterloo, where we have students who actively use these apps on a regular basis, and in Ottawa and in Kingston, you have, and in Windsor, sorry, Speaker, so you have to consider the impact that these workers have on the overall economy. They are actually more important than they've ever been to the success of Ontario's economy. Couriers and restaurants are in this together, but what they face are bad employers profiting off the pandemic and not giving workers or restaurants a fair shake. Foodsters United, who organized Foodora workers and won the right to be classified as employees, had the following requests from their employers regarding the second wave safety. I don't know if you remember the Foodora. They kind of left the province after they lost in court that the rights and the rights of their employees were being violated. So they took off. As we head into the second wave, and that once again this is Foodora, and it says, what do gig delivery workers need to stay safe while working in the second wave? So again, not acknowledging that gig workers have rights, have the responsibility to actually be part of the safety plan. They've actually put forward recommendations, which could have actually been also embedded and enshrined in legislation. It says, as we head into the second wave of the COVID pandemic in Toronto and Canada, couriers have once again been labelled as essential workers. We're delivering food, over-the-counter medicines, and groceries, risking our health and safety with only meagre protections. This pandemic has been hard on all of us. We are struggling to get by and struggling to access benefits when there has been no work or when we get sick. We are issuing a set of demands to our employers and a call for solidarity to customers, the public, and allies. And you would be surprised how basic their requests are. Access to washrooms and hand washing, protective equipment, no contact drop-offs, Mr. Speaker. Respect the right to refuse unsafe work, to be protected when you are refusing unsafe work. Guaranteed return to work if you fall ill or need to go unserved. Paid sick time, a basic request of these essential workers. Hazard pay, the establishment of a gig worker joint health and safety committee, and then update the tipping system and encourage tipping, and then hiring and firing freeze. Does Bill 236 address any of these issues? Unfortunately, it does not, Mr. Speaker. So we find ourselves in a most unfortunate position of having to support a very small step for small businesses who were being gouged from the delivery app companies, and now and just the antics around this piece of legislation is concerning, Mr. Speaker, because there is obviously a push to move Bill 236 very quickly through this House. I've indicated, as have other members of this official opposition, that a lack of consultation has once again resulted in a weak piece of legislation to address a key issue that we all face. So the cap, just to recap, the cap on fees only applies to restaurants that are currently in closure. The exclusion of chain restaurants may negatively impact businesses. And I just want to say, on behalf of chain restaurants, it's true that Pizza Pizza and Kelsey, I mean, they're large chains, but they are family-owned, Mr. Speaker, and so these are small family businesses in many respects. Why exclude them from? Why give them a loophole in this? Why build it into a piece of legislation? The bill only applies during the pandemic and will mean that businesses will go back to paying the incredibly high fees during the recovery period, which means they will continue to struggle. So clearly, the government has missed the opportunity to address a very key issue that affects essential workers, in this instance, delivery couriers. They've failed to address basic health and safety and worker rights in Bill 236. And based on the stakeholder reaction, the Canadian Franchise Association, the CFIB, has raised concern about the exclusion of the chains. Delivery app companies have flagged their concerns. Obviously, the City of Toronto is supportive. They passed a motion long ago, and it's actually been called for months. So the City of Toronto wanted the provincial government to move in this direction a long time ago. And then, of course, CUPW has raised concern about the part of the bill that says wages cannot be rolled back, saying that the onus is on the worker to prove that their pay has been reduced and not the company to prove that they didn't cut anything. But I just want you to remember the voice of that worker who really feels that this piece of legislation does not address her working conditions, and definitely feels that the language and the tough talk of the Premier is not going to protect her as an employee, and will really just download these extra costs to workers. And what a missed opportunity for this government, and really a missed opportunity for us all to work together and make sure that this piece of legislation addressed a very core health and safety and economic issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.